Turning to the Republican race, where two big names have been bumped off the main debate stage.
That's right. The Fox Business Network announced yesterday that both Christie and Mike Huckabee did not make the cut and will now participate in what's called the undercard debate next week with Bobby Jindal and Rick Santorum. Here with us from the Face the Nation set is moderator John Dickerson. Thanks for being with us, John.
Morning, Vlad. Congratulations on your first year.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that. So, John, Christie seems to be picking up some steam after a good debate performance. He's been rising in the polls, Marco Rubio as well. Does this sort of hamper them? Does this bring them back, stunt that momentum?
Well, it does for Christie, certainly. I mean, Marco Rubio obviously is going to make that main stage. The challenge for Christie is that he's been out of the main conversation for a while, but he's been going slow and steady in New Hampshire. It has paid off, not just in movement in the horse race poll question in New Hampshire, but also in when you ask voters do they have a favorable opinion of him, his numbers have really improved. That's important because there was a lot of skepticism about Christie in Republican ranks. Now he's going to miss his sort of marquee moment. That's a lot of free television when you have a moment on the main debate stage, and it's harder to break through when you're in that secondary debate.
Yeah, so John, on that point, I mean, is there a bigger question here about the debate stage being determined by national polls instead of state polls?
Well, yes, you can argue it kind of round or flat. I mean, you can argue that the state polls are the most important because they are the first parts of the process. On the other hand, these debates are not just about the states in which the early part of the process is taking place, but it's about the whole party and about the national questions and conversation. So it's hard to come up with a perfect criteria for dealing with who's going to be on the debate stage. But I think the real downside of not winnowing the field in these debates at some point is that they then become not debates at all, but just kind of parallel press conferences held with such a large number of people. There's no exploration of ideas and no exchange between the candidates about issues. So at some point, the field has to shrink. So now we're seeing it happen.
John, let me ask you about Dr. Ben Carson. He is facing a lot of scrutiny from the press about his youth, from attempting to stab someone to trying to hit his mother with a hammer. But it seems that there's not a lot of discussion about the issues. There's a lot of stuff that doesn't seem to affect Americans who are hardworking, who are perhaps suffering with the bad economy. What do you make of that?
Well, that would be what Ben Carson would say. I think this is an example of what he's talked about for a while, which is the press going down into some tiny little corner, creating a conversation about something that's not on the top, say, 15,000 items that Americans care about in terms of their daily lives, and that this represents the warping that goes on in the mainstream media. And he's got a case there. This kind of investigation of biography is important if it leads to some discussion about the character the person would have in office. But these questions about whether his narrative about these incidents are true or not really doesn't undermine the central narrative of his life, which is that he came from poverty and rose to be one of the nation's most renowned neurosurgeons. That's all still intact. That seems to me to be the central question. If you're going to look at sort of character and background, that's still a part of his story. Then, of course, there are the things that he actually believes and wants to promote in terms of what this country should, the kinds of policies it should have going forward. And that doesn't get much conversation or discussion when there are debates going on about whether he did or didn't do what he says he did when he was a kid.
But Donald Trump has been tweeting about this, though. Does this mean that he senses an opening, there's blood in the water, he's going after him, even if it may not affect, everyday Americans?
Well, it's an interesting gambit by Trump because, yes, he's trying to make his opponent look, strange, and he has been very sharp when he's gone after other candidates and has a kind of heat-seeking talent for picking a weakness and exploiting it. But all of those people that he's taken down in previous instances have been politicians, with the exception of Carly Fiorina. He's playing on a different turf here with Ben Carson. And so it's more possible with Ben Carson that he will be, that Trump could be seen as kind of doing the handiwork of either the mainstream media or Carson's opponents. And that's tricky because Ben Carson and Donald Trump are going after the same kinds of voters. And if Trump misfires here, then he ends up turning off just the kind of voters that he needs to keep himself at the top of the polls. And we'll have to just see how that plays out.